Yes, thank you very much. First of all, for the invitation and for having us here, for giving us the opportunity to present our project here today. Thanks to the organizers, especially to you, Dawoodi. And unfortunately, we couldn't make it yesterday because this is very much a project in progress, and we actually had various interactions with the Bohra community yesterday. So what you hear today is very tentative, and it's based on things that we are, so to say, collecting as we are speaking and here as we are here in Sharjah. So, as Dawoodi already said, we are 5 in the project. Unfortunately, only 4 can be here. Cecil is not with us today, but all 4 of us will basically introduce a part of the project, while I will start with a quick introduction now. As you can see, the title is Constructing the Ocean, Indian Ocean Infrastructures and FIC Transregionalism. And the picture here shows a gentleman from the Bohra community, the community we are working with, looking down at a neighborhood in Mumbai called Bendi Bazaar, which is currently undergoing a rapid and quite dramatic transformation. So the older and somewhat dilapidated houses, Kotchaula, have more or less disappeared, and you have the high-rising buildings that you can see there in this projection. You have basically a sacred core with a mosque and the shrine of the former head of the community on the left-hand side, and then you have it basically rising up to 80 floors there, so altering the skyline of Mumbai. And we are particularly interested in the project in community-driven infrastructure projects, so this is a community project. We were inspired to start this project through the literature on, of course, infrastructure, work of Larkin or of Akhil Gupta, Benjamin Corbin, and many others, and of course the huge body of work on the Indian Ocean. But what triggered the project was basically contacts that Thomas had in Bahrain initially, and the sheer size and scale of this ongoing transformation in Mumbai. So we ask ourselves, how have Bohras shaped infrastructures and have been shaped by them? How do infrastructure projects engineer, assert, and transform transregional connections and imaginaries across the Indian Ocean? Now we have still one more year to go to complete this project, but we are slowly getting to the phase of writing, and we were inspired as well by the work of Enseng Ho and his idea of FIC transregionalism. Now we are sort of increasingly moving on to the third question here: how does one actually write transregionalism that is FIC socially and historically? And our tentative answer, so to say, a way to operationalize it is to look at one particular community, that is the Bohra community. Now, we had already some interactions today, and most of you probably are familiar with the Bohra community, but just to mention here it very briefly, we are talking about a Shia Muslim or Ismaili community, which is fairly distinct in terms of, as you can see it in the pictures, the dresses, but it's also the language, if the community members wearing it. And there is as well as a community platform that is, so to say, connecting the community. It's often a community that is in minority or multiple minority situations. It's fairly centralized and currently led by the spiritual leader, the 53rd Dai, or as he is referred to, the Sayyidna Mufaddal Saifuddin, and you can see his portrait here as well. The community is tracing its lineage to the Fatimid dynasty in Egypt, flourishing between the 10th and 12th century, before the community center shifted then to Yemen and on to India. And you can see on this lower picture one of the important historical and religious sites of the community, the Al-Anwar Mosque in Cairo, which has been reconstructed by the community in the late 70s and has been a kind of focal point for the rejuvenation of the community, as it is often stated. So it's a highly mobile, mercantile community, and we were particularly interested in infrastructures understood in a sort of broad sense as religious, educational, healthcare infrastructures, or housing, etc. The project focuses on this community which has a global presence, but a particularly strong presence around the Indian Ocean. And we are using here a map made by one of the scholars from within the community, Yusuf Umritwala, who actually has sort of depicted the presences of the community here on a global map. But of course, as you can see from the lower map, the historical connections date back many centuries. In the project, we have selected 4 localities, and as you can see here, Thomas will focus, or is focusing, particularly on Dubai, and will do so in his presentation, while Isha is focusing on the Bendi Bazaar project in Mumbai. Cecil, who's not here, is actually looking more at Dar es Salaam and Zanzibar, while Matthias is then focusing on Cairo, and my own project dealing particularly also with visual culture, so to say, going across these localities. So we are looking at particular themes that have emerged so far. One is upliftment and migration, and Isha will talk a little bit about that, but there's also about the everydayness of infrastructures, the state relations, and particularly visual culture, again in a sort of broader sense, including architecture, photography, calligraphy, and many other art forms. And I will move on to that now. So in my own sort of sub-project, I'm playing right now a little bit with the idea of the edifice, and you can see again the Al-Anwar mosque here that you saw in one of the previous slides. And you can see actually the image which was taken by Zainab Imauddin, who is the daughter-in-law of the Sayyidna, or head of the community, and is also sort of a prominent community member promoting arts through a community platform called Radiant Arts. And on her Instagram account, she posted this kind of statement about her experience of a visit to the Al-Anwar Mosque. If you look at the image, it's highly suggestive, of course, in terms of the symbolism. She's moving, so to say, from a darker foreground to a lighter background into the courtyard of the mosque. Of course, the thresholds are marked with the curtains. And of course, we could see this as a journey from darkness into light, which is actually as an inscription in the mosque, and is a sort of central theme for the community of the Fatimi philosophy and religion. So as she writes, any endeavor, just like any structure, requires a firm foundation. Al-Jami al-Anwar's restoration was founded upon the belief in the oneness of the Creator and love for the Prophet Muhammad and his Ahl Bayt, his family. Upon the solid footing, alongside the beautiful pointed arches and piers that were erected over the 27-month period, that was the reconstruction period that happened in 1979 and 80, another equally radiant edifice was raised, an edifice housing the philosophy of Fatimi restoration, the method of devotion to the Fatimi Imam, and the concept of Fatimi faith in the 21st century. Without secure footings and well-established foundations, neither can buildings rise nor beliefs and faith be sustained. So she makes this very close connections between the building and the belief or the faith here. And this is something which is not only done by her, there are various other community publications, like the book The Luminous Mosque, which refers to the Al-Anwar, Jami al-Anwar, has a chapter completing the edifice, where it's also stated that this connection plays actually a crucial role. True to its name, Al-Jami al-Anwar is a shining example of Fatimi art and architecture, as well as its thought and philosophy. So I'm playing with this idea of edifice here as an imposing structure and as a complex structure of belief or a system of ideas, which I think is at the heart of Bohra understandings of construction. And this combination of architecture and faith has sort of a kind of transformative impact in the Bohra discourse on those who actually visit the mosque. And we could talk about the relatively limited role of the architect in this context. It's about the community, it's about the Fatimi philosophy that matters. It's less about the architect, but it very much relates to negotiating a balance between what then the Bohras would juxtapose, the material versus the spiritual, the tangible, the mosque versus the intangible, the faith, or versus, between deen and dunya, between the spiritual and the worldly matters, so to say. And Bohra constructions are, in that sense, monumentalizing faith, but also imbibing values, particularly also into future generations. And I would like to give you an example of how these religious and educational infrastructures merge by talking about particularly the University of the Community, which has 4 campuses called Jamia, and these campuses, as you can see on the map, are found in the oldest one in Surat from 1814, and then you have Karachi from the early 80s, and Nairobi, which was established in 2017, and Mumbai Marol in 2023. So here, of course, you have the sacredness of knowledge, so you can't really separate the religious from the educational, and you will see that through the mosque in the university or on campus. And what the community is projecting here is, through those campuses, that the Dowri Bohra community is a modern, educated, peace-loving, law-abiding, mercantile, religious community. And I would argue that you can see on campus, enshrined in stone, so to say, these aspects projecting a modern community, a mercantile, mobile community that migrated to several places, but also, of course, the religious community that it is. So to introduce those 3 ideas, you have it as the Jamia, the university, as a neo-Fatimid construction. It is argued, this is the campus in Nairobi, the inner courtyard, where you have the view of the mosque there. It's argued that this is a replica, as you can see, the first in the world to be built entirely on the pattern of Al-Jami Al-Anwar in Cairo. So you bring, so to say, Cairo to Nairobi, if you want to say, and bring it also to Mumbai and on the other campuses, or Karachi for that matter. So you have replications of these architectural elements. For example, it's not only the minaret, it's also the horseshoe arches that are taken from another Fatimi mosque, Al-Madiyah, which is in present-day Tunisia, but also the stucco grills from the Al-Anzar mosque in Cairo, etc. So you have various hyperlinks that refer this building to other buildings which are extremely relevant to the community. You have ideas of Fatimi philosophy like the radiant axis, which is an east-west axis following the path of the sun, which is, so to say, the main line of the campus. But you also have the inner courtyard here in front of the mosque, which is part of the sacred core, which has the palm trees as an important element with connections to Egypt. There's a whole discourse around nurturing the palm trees, how important it is. There's a lot about numerology. It's 53 palms because it's the 53rd day currently, and so on. We heard a bit in the morning about the palm trees as well. And just to add this element very briefly here, we visited this week actually the Burhani Mosque in Dubai. We also have the element of the palm tree very prominently displayed, not only in the mosque itself, but also as a central feature of one of the important annual community events, the Ashara Mubarakah, about which Thomas will talk in a minute. So there's a lot about that could be said about the palm tree and how the community relates to it. Just on the side, very briefly, how this recreation of Cairo in Nairobi is perceived. I mean, you have a lot of Instagram posts of students, one of them who's also a photographer. In the middle is Jusa here, who then writes in this post, I mean, the feeling was surreal, like I was there in Fatimi Cairo. So there's really this idea that these buildings create this feeling of being in Cairo and have an impact on the students. Moving on to the second part, it's not only about the religion, it's about the community narrative. You can see the sacred core with the courtyard here in the middle and the mosque and those other buildings around, which is the Center for Quran Learning, the library, etc. And then you have peripheral buildings which have less of a sort of religious role to play. And what you find is the community history particularly strongly as a symbolic landscape enshrined and etched into this sacred core. For example, the front of the library, which is the glass front here during our visit in Nairobi in 2023, has an image of the Cove of Bounty, which was in place for the community to take refuge before actually then the community moved to India. So you have the sort of the part of Yemen as part of the library image enshrined. Another example, if you take the ceremonial hall, the Ivan, you have a kind of what Iva Ong would call the interreferencing, so references to another university, but in a sort of loose way without being sort of strictly following that pattern. And you can see it here, the Mughal architecture refers to India, the Indian side of the community. You can see it in the arches, but there are also very concrete examples, the balconies taken from a palace in Jamnagar, which was the center of the community at one point of time, where the Dai would also teach. So this is taken as a balcony for the examinations which the head of the community is conducting nowadays. And you find the same elements then in Marol and in Surat. And by the way, the window which is used in Surat is then again a window from the minaret from Al-Anwar as sort of an inspiration. Or here for the entrance to the dining hall, the Mewait, you have it from a shrine in Jamnagar, so to say, as a more direct reference or as a modeling in Iva Ong's sense. So last but not least, the projection of the modern community is very strongly coming out in their discourses. It's within the garden. It has all these sustainability features in terms of rainwater harvesting and so on, which the community proudly presents. And it has also the labs that you can see here presenting, so to say, a world-class image of the campus. And I think that's sort of really what is important here, world-class facilities, in this case with a star architect who is not very sort of prominently presented, but nevertheless sort of a very important part of this architectural campus. And the idea is then to balance these things seamlessly without interruptions, so to say, which is part of the upliftment as a spiritual upliftment at the university, and that brings us on to.
Right. Thank you, Uwe, for that really speedy presentation of the entire project. As Uwe said, my part of the project is to look at this ongoing massive urban redevelopment project that the community has undertaken in a very crowded part of Bombay, which is also the spiritual and the administrative headquarters of the community. The larger area was what was colonially called the native town, the town which was which was beyond the fort area that the Europeans in Bombay built. It is a very diverse area with a lot of communities coexisting for a very long time. But along with that has come, this perception of a neighborhood that is predominantly Muslim, and all the other stereotypes that come with a neighborhood being predominantly Muslim. Amidst all of this, in 2009, this project of redeveloping Bhindi Bazaar was announced and undertaken. It was the passion project of the 52nd leader of the community, Sayyidina Burhanuddin, and it has been taken. He passed away in 2014. It has been taken forward by the 53rd Sayyidina Mufaddal Saifuddin. You saw a picture of him in one of the previous slides, and a trust was specifically created to undertake this massive project. The trust is called the SBUT, or the Safi Burhani, named after the 52nd Sayyidina Safi Burhani Upliftment Trust. Upliftment being a word which is a key element in this specific project, which is an actual material transformation of this neighborhood. But material transformation and the idea of upliftment comes along with other understandings of what upliftment means in the community, which is what my work has been primarily focused on in the project. So, and as you can see, this is an image of what the vision is for the project. It is ongoing since 2009 was when it was announced. From 2011 it has been underway. Some of it is done. A lot of it is remaining to be done. So this is an area in perpetual that has been in sort of a perpetual phase of transition and transformation. But it's emanates from, this is a visual representation of what the completed project will look like, a massive addition to the skyline of the city of Mumbai. It emanates from a spiritual core, which is the mausoleum. There are two structures there, the mausoleum of the 51st and 52nd Sayyidinas, which is called the Rawd al-Tahira, a beautiful marble, a very lavish marble structure. And opposite it is the Safi Mosque, which has been, which was also rebuilt and in the same image that it was earlier, and together these form the spiritual core of the project. From there emanates the high rises which have been planned, which would lead to the relocation of several of the families belonging to the community and their businesses into these high-rises. One high-rise has come up and people have moved back who were in transit accommodations. Others are underway and the plans for it to build other even more high-rises within the project is underway. So my part of the project was to try and understand how has a project like this been envisioned by those who are at the center of planning it and executing it, and then how is it being relived and lived on an everyday basis. Those who are in the process of waiting for getting the new homes or businesses or shops in the new redeveloped buildings, and those who have already come back, how has that, what does it mean to be uplifted in this very literal and metaphorical sense. And across, through field work that I've been conducting in Bombay from the summer of 2022 and on and off since then, I've seen this project sort of, grow, stop in between because of some political issues, and then start again, and it is on again. And through the ethnography that I have done alone and also along with some of the other project members, a picture of upliftment that emerges from those who are telling me from above what it means for the community, and also those who have who are living it, is one of expressing being a state of or endeavoring for constant improvement, and also a universal idea of making the person next to you also taking them along with you in this upliftment journey. So it sounds very very inclusive and open-ended in many ways, but also this is a community that is very fond of still creating boundaries of the upliftment being very community driven. So the boundaries of the project, 16.5 acres. Bindi Bazaar is a large area, and this is the Bohri Mohalla in Bindi Bazaar. So 16.5, their website, very elaborate, beautiful website for the redevelopment, gives you exact numbers of how many families included, how many acres the project constitutes, how many businesses, how many, so the numbers are very specific, defining its boundaries, which is also, to some extent, the idea of defining the boundaries of what upliftment as a metaphorical, spiritual, in a spiritual, more free-floating sense, what the understandings of the concept is for the community. Now, my primary field is Bhindi Bazaar and Bombay, but we've also traveled to these other field sites with other project members, and the stories that emerge again are of these floating words of transformation, of rejuvenation, of betterment, of constant improvement, which are stable across their narrative through space and historically, and we're trying to unpack what this would mean together in a history of the community across the Indian Ocean. I think there is a lot that there, through the ethnography that has emerged, but time is of the essence, and I can answer more questions in the quick Q&A. Thanks.
Good. Thank you for hanging in on this Bohra marathon. We have already heard sort of about Bohra. Oh, it's opposite. This is me. About sort of Bohra transregionalism from Uwe, and also particularly about the community's visual repertoire, often drawn from Cairo and from the community's history of migration. And my sort of focus within this project overlaps with many of these things, but zoom specifically in on the meaning of Cairo to the Bohras, sort of in two overarching senses, both Cairo as a contemporary location of a resident Bohra community, and a sort of central hub of Bohra pilgrimage that integrates very well with the sort of community's transregionalism. And then I focus on Cairo sort of as a historical and visual repertoire of the Bohras, most sort of clearly visible in the architecture that Uwe already spoke about. And then I'm particularly interested in these restoration projects. However, for my part today, I wanted to speak a bit also to the conference, focus on ecology and environment to the extent that I can do that. And this means that I will say a bit about point one on this one, focusing on the sort of backstory of how and why the Bohras came to Cairo, or as they see it, came back to Cairo, which, at least in my perspective, serves as a sort of telling story of interconnected history and environments across the ocean. So the history of Indian and Bohra Egyptian ties is obviously quite old, and especially center on exactly the medieval Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt as playing a sort of a key role in fostering the oceanic trade and missionary connections between Egypt and India in the pre-modern period. However, after the fall of the Fatimids in the 12th century, and especially after the Bohras established themselves in Gujarat in India in the mid-16th century, ties to Egypt sort of became less direct. I mean, certainly Indian oceanic trade from Gujarat made it all the way over the Arabian Sea through the Red Sea to Egypt, but the particular wind regime of the Red Sea, where the monsoon only affects the southern parts while the northern parts has this quite consistent wind going north to south, combined then with the dominance of Egyptian traders on exactly the northern parts of the Red Sea, meant that Jeddah on the Arabian Peninsula seemingly became the furthest that Gujarati traders such as the Bohras generally went up the Red Sea before the Egyptian partners sort of took over and led the wares through the overland route through Egypt. And this sort of part environmentally and part politically determined monopoly of the Egyptian traders meant that the Bohras and Cairo was quite distant, in fact, until the modern epoch. Of course, in the ages of sort of empire and steam, this was challenged on the one hand by exactly new technologies and infrastructures, but also by the emergence of the modern state of Egypt in the early 19th century, which did much to challenge sort of the political dominance of the Egyptian traders in the Red Sea. And finally, of course, we have the opening of the Suez Canal that sort of changed the environment for people and jellyfish alike, as it were, and made Egypt even more accessible to Indian trade communities. But still, the Bohras did not establish themselves in Cairo, their home country, nor Alexandria, like other Indian merchants actually were doing, and particularly since the mid-19th century. And this was not because the the Bohras did not have the means or reasons to do so. In 1813, a huge earthquake struck Kutch in Gujarat, which set the Bohra community's modern pattern of migration, moving from Gujarat to East Africa, where the first settlers arrived in 1815. And as a leading community member here in Dubai said to us a few days ago, the Bohras became even more receptive to movement after exactly this earthquake. And the earthquake is also sort of in contemporary community literature often taken as the beginning of Bohra migration as such. Still, Cairo and Egypt were not places to go. The monsoon was sort of still the defining migratory pattern for the Bohras, leading them to East Africa. So, when did they then finally come to Cairo, this sort of pseudo-literal location of the Indian Ocean? And this is where we need to add pilgrimage, religion, and politics into this sort of environmental history mix. Pilgrimage has, of course, obviously always been a large part of Bohra community, but it seems mainly to have been taking place in India and Yemen in the pre- and early modern periods. From the early 20th century, however, pilgrimage became more centrally organized by the Bohra leadership, and they expanded their already at this point very impressive infrastructures into primarily Iraq, but also gradually the Hijaz. And we actually also have reports of Bohra pilgrims coming from East Africa to Syria in the 1920s, which brought some attention to it in the Arab media. However, Egypt, though some definitely visited at this point, was not yet established as a site. So in the mid-1930s, as part of a larger sort of tour to sites in the Middle East, then religious leader of the Bohras, Da'i Sayyidina Tahir Saifuddin, went to Egypt and connected especially with the so-called Young Muslim Men Association, a pan-Islamic association of some renown in Egypt. What the association in Egypt sort of saw of possibilities in Tahir Saifuddin's visit was that he might throw a lot of money and sums of money towards restorations of Fatimid sites, while Tahir Saifuddin and the Bohras, on the other hand, saw the possibility to sort of enhance their pan-Islamic credentials and also, of course, to expand their pilgrimage infrastructures. And it happened also in the end, but it took another 40 years. And I'll sort of skip these 40 years because it's a sort of long political history. Instead, sort of wrapping up on my part here, I want to point out to sort of the main, hopefully somehow reasonable main point about this interconnected history of the Bohras and Egypt until the 1930s. Namely, that Bohra transregionalism has seen different stages, obviously, dependent on various sort of environmental, technological, infrastructural conditions, politics, and religion. From the Fatimid medieval times of sort of expansive missionary and trade system to the, in some case, limited world of monsoon trade in the post-Fatimid period, to then the oceanic openings of the modern period. And while that history is not particularly surprising, I myself take it sort of these different layers as a good reminder to us in the project, and I suppose also at a large level to those interested in the Indian Ocean communities, is that when we have the ocean in focus, it's not just about thinking trans-local, but also thinking sort of across different conditions that we have to keep in mind when we look at these particular communities. So that somehow elegantly perhaps leads us on to Thomas, who will talk more about one of sort of the more contemporary expressions of this transregionalism.
Thank you very much, and I hope I can talk for 5 more minutes. I know we are a bit over time. Today? Here? Okay. On the PowerPoint, yes. Like this, right? Good. So I focus in this project on Dubai and the Emirates, and I have worked with the Gulf region for some time before that as well in other projects. And I first want to take a step back and also address the concept of intertwined ecologies as in this theme of the conference, but maybe in a slightly different way. It seems to me that there are two different narratives of ecology and nature in the Gulf region and in the Emirates, namely one of the desert and one of the sea. And as you see here, one of the images of the desert, also go out in the desert, but in sort of cultural displays and heritage displays in the UAE pavilion at Expo Dubai in 2021, it was all desert. It was the desert that was branded as the UAE brand, which is often is in a Gulf context. But I was a bit surprised on that because I focused on Dubai, and in Dubai everything is about the ocean. It's about sea and connection and mobility. Which you probably also know when you get here. So there's another narrative also in the museums about the Dubai Creek as the birth of the city and of ocean-going trade, which is still taking place, to some extent at least, in these dhow ships that are at the Creek coastline now. And of course, we are mostly interested in this oceanic perspective in this project, but I will sort of nuance this perspective a bit during this talk. I will take inspiration, or we take inspiration from many different books on the Indian Ocean in this mushrooming literature there is, among others this book Monsoon Islam and the concept of Monsoon Islam from Sebastian Prange. And as he discusses in the introduction to the book, when we focus on Monsoon Islam, it is about trade, accommodation, and the blending of practices and traditions. And this is, as he say, arguably the trajectory that has defined the lived reality of the majority of Muslims worldwide, but is rarely in popular images and discourse about Islam today. So I think this is important also to bring into to the conversation, which is done by many studies at this moment, also by you in the audience here. Prange also notes how this is often contrasted with Islam, an image of Islam as a desert religion. So there's Monsoon Islam focused on connection on one side, and there's the desert religion and focused on isolation and uniformity on the other side. Prange quotes the French Orientalist Ernst Renan for saying in the 19th century the desert is monotheistic, sublime in its immense uniformity. So there are these two different narratives. And I suggest, or we suggest in this project, that by focusing on the Dawoodi Bohrasas, we can merge the two. We can intertwine these ecologies and merge the two narratives. Since the Bohrasas, in one sense, focus very much on transregional connections, but on the other hand, also is an inwardly focus on themselves community. And one example of this is from Dubai, and my fieldwork here is the Ashara Mubaraka commemorative ritual, which took place in Dubai. It takes place annually in different places, but took place in Dubai last year in the Hijri year 1445. Which is what the Bohrasas usually refer to. And this is an event where 75,000 people, in this case in Dubai, gathered in Dubai from the Bohrasas community from all around the world. Normally Dubai has around 15,000 members of the community inhabiting Dubai, and there are 25,000 in total in the Emirates. Also here in Sharjah, just across the street here, is their main mosque in Sharjah. And then 75,000 people came to Dubai, invited, you could say, by their Dai al-Mutlaq, the spiritual leader, who presides over the event, sitting here at his Takhat seat and doing the sermons of the event in the particular way that the Bohrasas do the rituals of commemorative rituals for Imam Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, over a 10-day period. So this is also a very important gathering for the community worldwide. Annually, where they meet from many different places. You could see the map before, that they reside in many different places, and they try as many as possible from the 1 million community that it is to gather in a particular site. Of course, not 75,000 people could not be in the Bohani Mosque, which is just across the border from Sharjah here, in Bohani Mosque in Kusais at the same time. So they would take turns, and there would be relay centers such as the mosque in Sharjah and other mosques in the Emirates, but also the World Trade Center in Dubai was rented for the event so that it could take care of 30,000 worshippers at one time following the sermons online. And this is, of course, community building in many ways, both inwardly and outwardly. A very visible community on the one hand with the special attire, with these big presents, but also a sort of invisible community which do the rituals in the mosques and are not very well known to people from outside of these the specificities of the tradition and faith. So inwardly and outwardly on the same time, visual and invisible at the same time, isolation and connection at the same time, we would argue. It's community building also in the sense that, we go back 20 years, there was another Ashara Mubaraka in Dubai, the first one in the Middle East, apart from Cairo, which I'll come back to just in a moment, where the Bohani Mosque was opened and it was inaugurated by this Ashara Mubaraka. And people say at that time that area between Sharjah and Dubai was only desert, but now the mosque was constructed and people were invited to come to develop Kusais. And now it's a Bohra neighborhood. It's also many other things, but it's also a Bohra neighborhood with a community school, residential buildings, and a private hospital run by Bohrasas. And in that sense, they are also inspired by Sheikh Rashid's motto, "Build and they will come," which is something that they have used very often in conversations with us. That if you build a mosque, for example, you will create a community around that. So in that sense, they share this vision with the Emirati leadership. And this, of course, is not only a case for Dubai, and this is where I will end. It's also stories of Ashara Mubaraka in a wider world, and also a wider Indian Ocean. It's not only around the ocean. It started in Cairo in 1980. This was the first sort of international Ashara Mubaraka, and it has been twice in Dubai. It has also been in London and Houston. It's often at times in India, as this image from Surat, which very much looks like the one in Dubai, and it has also been several times in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam in Africa. So this also opens up the Indian Ocean. It's not only about the geographic region of the Indian Ocean itself, but also the wider world, such as also London and Houston and other places. Thank you very much. I think this is the presentation from us, and now we will have a few minutes for questions, I hope.
So I want to open the floor for questions, comments, reflections.
I have just two very quick questions. The first time that I encountered Bohrasas was in Cairo, and the dress was particularly eye-catching. And, you know, perhaps flippantly, I would refer to the women's dress as Little House on the Prairie clothing. Do you do anything with dress in your project? And the other question is about their relationship with the Aga Khans, because that's the other big presence that one notices in Cairo of the Shia lineages.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what purpose the Ashara served, and in some way does that, is that a space for much more deliberation, or is that just purely like a religious event, or?
Thank you so much. In connection to what our sister asked about the term Ashara Mubaraka, So I just want to know the relationship between this term and their rituals, because Ashara Mubaraka, it's like something ta'in, like Mubarak, which is like precious. So what's the relationship between the term and the rituals or the activities those people are doing? Thank you.
Any more questions at the moment? Or yeah, we got a question over here. Alden has a question.
Oh, thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit more about like the legal regimes in which the financial holdings or the trusts are organized.
So, should I begin?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll address the question about their clothing, and especially the women's clothing, because yes, you're right. They have very specific attire, which makes them, identifiable as members of a community, and that is also the intention that they are visible when they wear. The men wear a cap which is white and gold, and what they call a kurta saya, which is a long robe-like thing, but with trousers as well. And the women, as you said, they wear what is called ridas, and they are very colorful. And over my interactions with several of the women in the community, the question of this dress comes up. Sometimes they bring it up themselves. Sometimes I have asked them about it, and are there, at what age do they start wearing it, and it has led to really interesting conversations even beyond the specific attire. The interesting thing that comes out of these discussions about the rida is that yes, they start wearing the ridas at 12 when there is a ceremony called the Misak ceremony, where they take an oath to be faithful in the community, to the faith, and they promise to do certain things within the community and abide by its ethos, and then they have to wear it. So a lot of women wear it regularly. They wear it all the time. They also there are businesses dedicated to selling the rida, which are many times run by women in the community. There are shops in Bindi Bazaar. There we have also encountered women who do this, who have businesses which sell the rida to the community members and run it through Instagram here in the UAE as well. But the question of whether they wear it all the time, whether whether there's a negotiation of when to wear it, when not to wear it, it has come up, and there are women who say that they wear it all the time. They find it very comfortable and comforting to wear, and they also follow fashion trends within it. So they say this is a particular fabric that is fashionable to wear right now. I've seen I've seen papers, newspaper articles on the rida from the 80s, where they said denim was of the fashion, to wear it in denim. But there are also how much they wear it, how often they wear it. There is a negotiation going on a subjective basis and location. So I thought that since Mumbai is the headquarters of the community, women in Mumbai would wear it most religiously. But I was told, we were doing fieldwork here, that Mumbai being so vast and the community being sort of diffused across the city now, there are women who don't wear it on an everyday basis. They wear it on occasions where they come to the mosque or where there is a community gathering. Whereas the community in Sharjah or in Dubai, being so congregated around the mosque and their residential buildings also around the mosque, wear it more often and perform the Bohrasas in a more stricter sense.
I will answer to the questions on Ashara Mubarak, some of the clarification questions. Thank you very much for these. First of all, to the term itself, Ashara Mubarak, as I think you also indicate, means the blessed 10, and Ashura or Ashara is the 10th day the day of Muharram, the day where Imam Hussein was allegedly killed in a battle in Karbala in 680, and this is what the commemoration is all about. But the very concept of Mubarakah means that it's also a blessed day. It's something that blesses the community, and it's an inspiration for the community to live on, and that goes for many Muslim communities. But in this particular community, as you also saw from the images, it's a very colorful event, a very joyful event, which is contrasts very much to other communities where it is associated very much with sorrow, grief, and also very dark colors connoting mosques and streets around them. And to the question of deliberations, I think that's a very good question and very interesting thing to pursue. First of all, there are religious deliberations. So after the sermons of the day, scholars from the community would take discussions, not debate perhaps, but some open discussions with people about how can we implement what the Dai has now said, what does it actually mean in our everyday life. So this is one way of deliberation of religious, but also I think very crucial, it is also, as some have said also this week, to us a family festival, a family gathering. It's the big family of the Bohrasas, and people, I think, although maybe not officially, can do business with each other, make business contacts. Some also meet their marriage partners. We have examples of that. There are also marriages actually after the Ashara event, and it's also a time for shopping. It's great to be in Dubai, and then people can go around shopping, or you can go to next year somewhere else and you can see a new country. So that's also an important part of the events.
Okay, I think I should say a bit about the Aga Khan question. This is a question we get often, and which is quite interesting for obvious reasons to think about sort of Bohra-Aga Khan relations. It's not something we focus particularly on in the project, so bear that in mind. But in general, I mean, the relations, if you ask, are cordial, and it seems so, but there are no particular sort of cooperations, and that is, of course, quite conspicuous given that, I mean, there's a shared history, but the way that they engage, for instance, in Cairo, now that have been mentioned, is there are some certain overlaps insofar as the Aga Khanis are very engaged in restoring places in Islamic Cairo, just as the Bohras are. But I think sort of as a general answer, the Aga Khanis have these huge projects that are sort of reaching out also beyond their community, and there are of course debates as to how successful they are and what kind of communities they cater to, that's for sure. But the Bohras, generally in many of these sort of infrastructural projects they have, and also restorative projects, are very much sort of community oriented towards themselves. That does not mean that others don't benefit from it. I mean, in Cairo, they have been restoring mosques to huge criticisms also from outside sort of conservatist community. But I think that would sort of be the general sort of difference. But there are many overlaps in history between the two, also in modern restoration practices, sharing sometimes, for instance, famous Egyptian architect Hassan Fathy was a huge part of the restoration of Al-Anwar Mosque, and later also quite close in collaboration with the Aga Khanis. So there are some interesting overlaps as well.
Just to add or supplement that with one or 2 points. I mean, yes, I mean, there's the shared sort of closeness in terms of the Ismaili legacy. There is also the shared ground, as Matthias just mentioned, in terms of philanthropic work, which also includes the hospitals, of course. So there are a lot of community hospitals, whether you have it, the Aga Khan Hospital in Dar, or whether you have it on a smaller scale, the clinic in Zanzibar, or many other places. And so you have the Safi Hospital in Dar again, which is then the community hospital, not exactly run as a trust, but seen as for the community and beyond. So you have a lot of shared ground on that side. But you also have the reconstruction, which is for the living community in India. For example, the Nizamuddin project is by the Aga Khan Foundation as an ongoing project with the community in mind, which is not the same exactly as the Bohra projects we saw. And the last point, I mean, when you look at architecture for relatively newer buildings or new constructions, we haven't really looked at it, combinations of Fatimi elements or Neo-Fatimid elements and other architectural elements, but as of now, it seems, I mean, if you look at school buildings in Mumbai, that the Aga Khan Foundation is sort of experimenting more with architectural styles than the Bohra community. But one of the things that is on the list maybe is the Ismaili Center in Dubai, just to see also what they are doing and what kind of architectural projects they have.
Can I just briefly on the question of legal relations, this is also a very important point. We look quite closely at how the community relates to the states where they reside. So they go to different places which is open to the Bohra community, and they try their best to maintain very good relationships to the states. For example, the Emirati state or the Uganda or Kenyan or Tanzania state, wherever it may be. Also spearheaded again by the spiritual leader, the Dai al-Mutlaq, who very often travels both to meet community members but also to meet state leaders of the various countries.
Thank you. That was really fascinating. So you mentioned that they are attempting to revive Fatimid architecture using the examples of Al-Azhar and Al-Madiyya, right? But a lot of Fatimid architecture has either not survived, especially in Al-Madiyya, right? The original Fatimid architecture does not survive. Al-Azhar has been renovated multiple times by the Ayyubids and then the Mamluks and then the Ottomans. So how do they make a distinction between Fatimid architecture versus what was done later to these mosques? Do they understand that, do they accept that these changes are not Fatimid in origin? How do they conceptualize these mosques as Fatimid when a lot of the structures that we see today are not Fatimid in origin?
Thank you for that question. This is, I mean, here we go into the question of restorations in Cairo in particular, because sort of the key mosques for this are neither Mahdiya or Al-Azhar. It is Jamal Anwar or Al-Hakim Mosque in Cairo. And the restoration of Al-Hakim Mosque that they began in 1979 and sort of went on until the 80s, 81, was very controversial. Because among the things that they did, at this point it was quite dilapidated. In contrast to the others that have been carried on and adding elements, it was quite dilapidated. And they did a lot of things about reviving in their head what was also the Fatimid architecture. And they're quite detailed in the way that they deliberate on these questions of what is Fatimi. And these discussions of what became and what are real Fatimi designs are rather complex. And it is something that particularly the international community and also Cairo-based community of architectural historians have been quite critical of, I think, at large. Because there are some elements there that they have been criticized for. But it's also some of the things they did, for instance, in Al-Anwar, was also amending the original structure and removing things. And these restorations that they had at Al-Anwar also went hand in hand with the restoration of the mihrab at Al-Azhar at this point, which, as you say, is Al-Azhar is a very complex mosque in terms of style. So there are so many entangled roads onto the Fatimid style, which is also why scholarship generally call it Neo-Fatimid, to take into account that we can hardly claim this to be. Yeah. Do you want to add?
Yeah, very, very briefly. I mean, you're right. I mean, there are a lot of questions that came up in the reconstruction process, and one of my favorite examples I'm looking at the moment, so to say, is the way the lantern has been, recreated in the process of reconstructing Al-Anwar. There was no example from Al-Anwar that could be, so to say, used in that process. So the then head of the community, while praying at Al-Aqma Mosque, rediscovered in a window of Al-Aqma Mosque the two-dimensional stone relief of a lantern, which was then turned by the community into a glass lantern, which is now widely used in Al-Anwar, but also Al-Azhar in a slightly different form, and many other places, and has become a central object, so to say, of the community, which is very much revered, but has this complex process of rejuvenating that element in the process of reconstructing the mosque. Yeah, and there are several similar examples of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Final questions, comments? Emery.
Thank you. Well, fantastic project. So the Dawoodi, Bohrasas, I guess they are, well, I don't know anything about that community, but I'm assuming that they are, all over the world. So why did you particularly choose, Mumbai, Cairo, and Dubai instead of, other places?
Thank you very much. Also a good question, and I think the project could easily be expanded to other sites, and we could have chosen other sites as well. But first of all, of course, Mumbai is the center of this is where the Dai resides, this is where most people live, this is where this Bendi Bazaar project is going on, which was very interesting to us. And the first two places, where people migrated from Gujarat was first East Africa in the early 19th century, and then the Gulf region in the from the early 20th century, first Bahrain and Kuwait, and then later on Dubai and the Emirates when this took off. And then we found out during the process, I would say, that Cairo was very important to this community and has this important historical background, but also that there are ongoing projects to restore these mosques Matthias was telling about, and we therefore also involved Cairo. But surely we could also go elsewhere in the future.
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists. So we've seen how communities linked to Africa's Indian Ocean islands and the larger Indian Ocean world grapple with environmental change. We've seen how religious affiliation, ritual practice, musical practice that we're about to hear also provide avenues for which people grapple with, make sense of, and articulate and engage in dialogue about their own responses to such. Of course, please, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for taking your time to spend here, to engage, to be part of this important conference. I'm sure the conveners would like you to consider Monsoon as an avenue through which you can continue this dialogue, continue this conversation, and seek to deepen it and enrich it. Of course, there will be many other opportunities for collaboration, as have been happening in various conversations between the breaks. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Jeremy, on behalf of the conveners? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks everyone. I want to just reiterate this point about Monsoon. We said this at the beginning, but our intention is absolutely to develop a special issue from the papers presented at this conference. So we will be in touch with you in the near future with the hope that everyone will send us their papers. We don't have a particular publication deadline in that regard, but we would very much like you to consider Monsoon, and that goes for the future as well. Even if you are not in a position to send us something in the near term, in the longer term, we would very much appreciate your consideration for the journal. I want to say on behalf of Rogaya Busharaf of Uday Chandra and Sarah Jappi. Thank you again. This has been a fantastic event. It's not quite over yet. We have a musical performance in the courtyard. Thereafter, we'll go to dinner. And of course, we have not quite a full day tomorrow, but we have an exciting program for tomorrow as well. We'll start a little bit later. We won't start quite so early tomorrow, but we look forward to that as well. And yeah, the conversation continues, but thank you again.